During my parents' anniversary dinner, my brother hijacked the evening to announce his massive new startup venture. Without a moment's hesitation, my father pointed a finger at me and declared, "You're emptying your savings to fund it." I walked out without a word. The next morning, the silence was broken by a private investigator knocking on my door. The man on my porch didn't look like a cop. He wore a rumpled gray suit, scuffed brown shoes, and carried a thick manila envelope. The morning air was sharp, biting through the thin cotton of my robe. I stood in the doorway of my condo, holding a half-empty mug of coffee, my brain still throbbing from the sheer audacity of the night before. 12 hours earlier, I had been sitting at a long mahogany table at an overpriced Italian restaurant downtown. It was supposed to be a celebration of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. I had paid for the private room. I had ordered the vintage Barolo my father liked. I had even bought the 3-tiered cake sitting on a silver stand in the corner. But the moment the entrees were cleared, my brother Caden stood up and tapped his knife against his wine glass. He didn't offer a toast to our parents. Instead, he unbuttoned his suit jacket, flashed a polished, rehearsed smile, and launched into a pitch for a tech platform he was building. It was something convoluted about blockchain and supply chain logistics, buzzwords strung together with no actual product. My mother cheered. She actually clapped her hands together and embraced him like he had just cured a disease. Then the room went quiet, and my father pointed his heavy, calloused finger directly across the table at me. "You're emptying your savings to fund it." I had frozen. The wine in my glass caught the dim restaurant light. "Excuse me?" Caden chuckled, a dismissive, breathy sound. "Come on, Margot. You don't even have a mortgage. You have all that disposable income. It's sitting in a low-yield index fund doing nothing." I looked around the table. There were 12 people there. Aunts, uncles, family friends. Not a single one of them broke the silence. Not a single person said, "Maybe you should ask her first." They just stared at me, waiting for me to pull out my checkbook and write away the security I had spent 10 years building at a Fortune 500 company. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I slowly pushed my chair back, the wood scraping loudly against the tile floor, and walked out without a word. Now, this man in the gray suit was standing on my welcome mat. "Legal documents for you," he said, his voice flat. He thrust the envelope toward my chest. I took it, my fingers numb. "What is this?" "Notice of breach of contract," the man said. He glanced over my shoulder, taking in the hardwood floors, the mid-century modern furniture, the quiet stability of my well-furnished condo. He sighed, a tired, heavy sound. "Look, lady, I just served the papers, but forging a verbal agreement affidavit is a felony in Washington. Whoever swore you committed to being an angel investor is playing a very stupid game." He turned and walked down the steps. I closed the door and tore open the envelope. There it was, typed out in stark black ink, a sworn affidavit from my father, claiming I had verbally committed $45,000 in seed capital to Caden's LLC 3 weeks ago. It was a complete fabrication, a legal intimidation tactic designed to panic me into compliance. I knew exactly who had orchestrated it. My father didn't know how to draft a legal affidavit. Caden did. My phone exploded for the next 4 days. It was a relentless barrage of guilt, threats, and manufactured panic. My mother left voicemails crying, saying I was ruining the family name. My father sent terse, demanding texts. On Thursday evening, Caden finally called. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "The developers need a $45,000 deposit by Friday," Caden said. "No hello, no apology, just a demand. The servers alone cost $12,000 a month. You work at a corporate grind. You have nothing better to do with that capital, Margot." "That is absolutely not how this works," I fired back, gripping the edge of my kitchen island. "You don't send a process server to my house with fake legal documents to extort me. They already put your name on the founder's page," he manipulated, his voice dropping into a smooth, patronizing register. "The mock-ups are printed. Are you going to humiliate me in front of my investors? Because if you back out now, you look like a flake. It ruins your reputation, not mine." "I never backed in," I said. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Her crying act had vanished. Her tone shifted to absolute ice. "If you don't show up to the launch party Friday night," she warned, "I will tell the extended family you are bankrupting your own flesh and blood. I will tell them you promised Caden the money and pulled it out from under him out of spite. Tell them whatever you want," I replied coldly. "I'll be there, and I guarantee I'll have something to share." She went silent. I could hear her breathing on the other end. She expected me to apologize. She expected me to write a check to keep the peace, just like I had done when Caden wrecked his car in college, just like I had done when my father needed a bridge loan for his failing hardware store 10 years ago. 2 days later, the morning of the launch party, my father called. "Your mother printed press releases with you listed as chief financial officer," he said gruffly. "The photographer arrives at 6. Bring your checkbook. We need the routing numbers for the wire transfer tonight." "I already said no, Dad." "I know," he replied. "That is the problem we are fixing." He didn't hang up. He just let the silence stretch. It was the same psychological trick he had used since I was in middle school. Stand in the doorway, say nothing, wait long enough, and the discomfort would make me cave. Not this time. I tapped the red button and ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my head was entirely clear. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a name I hadn't called in months. Aunt Vera. She was my father's older sister, the quiet woman who always sat in the corner at Thanksgiving, nursing a glass of scotch and observing the room with sharp, cynical eyes. She answered on the second ring. "Margot, Aunt Vera, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest with me." I told her everything. The dinner, the process server, the fake affidavit, the threats. I expected her to sigh and tell me family is complicated. I expected her to tell me to just give them a smaller amount to make it go away. Instead, she let out a dry, humorless laugh. "They pulled this exact grift on me 25 years ago," she confessed, her voice tightening. "Forced me to co-sign a loan for your father's first failed logistics company. Claimed it was a sure thing. When it went under, he stopped taking my calls. I spent 7 years digging out of debt, eating canned soup, nearly losing my house. Nobody offered a dime to help me. I leaned against the wall, the cold plaster grounding me. He did the same thing to you. I'll be at that party tonight," Vera told me, a newfound edge sharpening her words. words. I should have burned their house of cards down decades ago. I'll see you at 7. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Spencer. It was a screenshot of my brother texting the extended family group chat, a chat I had conveniently been excluded from. Margot's acting completely unhinged about my startup. Caden's message read, I think she's bitter she's stuck in middle management while I'm actually building something. Please don't mention the funding around her tonight. She's really sensitive about money right now. He was destroying my credibility before I even spoke. He was laying the groundwork so that when I refused to pay, I would look like the jealous, bitter sister trying to ruin his big night. I walked into my home office, pulled out a thick, ivory business card, and wrote 3 facts on the back of it with a heavy black pen. I slid it into the pocket of my blazer. Friday night. The downtown loft was packed. 50 people crowded into the rented space, champagne glasses clinking, a massive projector displaying Caden's sleek, minimalist new logo on the exposed brick wall. There were a few men in tailored suits I didn't recognize, presumably Caden's investors or potential clients. My parents were holding court near the open bar. When I walked in, my mother's eyes locked onto me. She leaned over and whispered something to my father. He gave a curt nod. At 7:30, my mother tapped a silver spoon against her champagne flute. The room quieted down. She beamed, stepping into the center of the room. We are so blessed to have all of you here tonight to celebrate Caden's brilliance, she announced, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. But none of this would be possible without family. We are so proud that Margot has agreed to empty her savings to act as our primary investor and CFO. She aimed a blinding, artificial smile directly at me. Right, sweetheart? Every head in the room pivoted to me. I felt the weight of 50 stares. The silence was absolute. I did not smile. Caden leaned over the podium, gripping the edges, playing the part of the exasperated but affectionate brother. Seriously, Margot, what exactly are you holding on to that money for? A luxury vacation? You don't even have a cat. A few people in the crowd chuckled. My uncle, my father's brother, scoffed from the back. Wouldn't kill you to support your family, kid. I stood up slowly from my stool near the back wall. I smoothed the lapels of my blazer. I reached into my pocket and touched the edge of the business card. Can I say something? I asked, my voice carrying clearly across the room. My mother relaxed her shoulders, assuming I was surrendering. She stepped back, gesturing graciously toward me. I need everyone to listen carefully, I announced, because several of you have been fed absolute lies about me this week. The smiles on the faces of the investors faltered. First, I said, holding up a single finger, I never agreed to fund this company. Nobody asked me to invest. I was assigned the role of an ATM at a dinner party. My mother's jaw dropped. Margot, this is not the time. Second, I continued, speaking over her. The morning after our parents' anniversary, a private investigator arrived at my home. Someone in this family filed a fraudulent, legally binding affidavit, claiming I made a verbal contract to hand over $45,000. My uncle lowered his glass, the scotch sloshing over the rim. He stared at my father. Someone sent a pie to your house? My mother's face turned a sickening shade of gray. Third, I said, turning my body to face the podium. I locked eyes with Caden. He looked like he was going to be sick. You told this family I was bitter and unhinged about your success. You planted that narrative in a group chat so nobody would believe a word I said today. That is insane. I never. Caden stammered, his polished facade cracking. He looked frantically at the men in the tailored suits. She's lying. She's just stressed. Spencer has the screenshot. I cut him off, my voice cracking like a whip. Spencer stepped out from the shadows near the coat rack. He didn't say a word. He just held his phone high, the screen glowing brightly, facing the crowd. I have it right here. Caden gripped the podium. He had nothing left. His confident tech visionary persona shattered in front of the very people he was trying to impress. Then, the sharp, rhythmic clicking of heels echoed against the hardwood floor. Aunt Vera stood up from a leather armchair in the corner. She held a glass of mineral water, her posture perfectly straight. She walked into the center of the room, stopping halfway between me and my parents. I need to share a story with all of you, Vera said to the dead silent room. She didn't raise her voice, but it commanded every ounce of attention in the loft. And it is a story I should have told 25 years ago. My father took a step forward, his face flushed dark red. Vera, sit down. You're drunk. I haven't had a drink in 12 years, Arthur, she replied cleanly. She turned to the crowd. 25 years ago, Arthur told this family he had a revolutionary idea for a hardware distribution company. He told me he just needed a co-signer for a $90,000 business loan. He promised me, on our mother's grave, that the capital was secured and my signature was a mere formality. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the projector fan. 6 months later, the company folded, Vera said, staring directly into my father's eyes. Arthur defaulted on the loan. The bank came after me. I lost my savings. I nearly lost my home. When I called my brother for help, he told me I should have read the paperwork closer. He told me it was the cost of doing business. Vera took a slow sip of her water. He is doing the exact same thing to his daughter right now. This family does not build businesses. This family builds traps. One of the men in the tailored suits, a tall man with silver hair at his temples, set his champagne flute down on a high-top table. The glass made a sharp clinking sound. He looked at Caden. Is this true? The man asked. Caden swallowed hard. Jasper, listen, we have the runway. The IP is solid. My sister is just, I asked if it was true, Jasper said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Did you forge a legal affidavit to extort your seed capital from a family member? It wasn't a forgery. My father suddenly boomed, stepping forward, unable to control his temper any longer. He pointed a finger at me, the veins in his neck bulging. She is legally bound. Her name is on the paperwork. I frowned, the adrenaline suddenly turning cold in my veins. What paperwork, Dad? I never signed anything. My father let out a harsh, ugly laugh. It wasn't the laugh of a man who was caught. It was the laugh of a man who still thought he held all the cards. You didn't have to, my father sneered. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded piece of heavy stock paper. Did you really think I'd leave the initial capital up to chance? Up to a moody, ungrateful daughter who hoards her money while her brother struggles? He unfolded the paper and held it up. When you were 22, my father father said, his voice dropping into a cruel, measured cadence. You gave me a limited power of attorney to handle the closing on your first starter condo while you were out of the country on that business trip. My stomach plummeted. The room started to spin, just slightly. I remembered the trip. London, 9 years ago. I had signed a temporary document so he could hand the cashier's check to the escrow agent. You never revoked it, Margot, my father said, a sickening smile creeping onto his face. It was never formally dissolved with the county clerk. No, I whispered. Yes, my father said. He looked at Jasper, then back to me. Caden didn't need your cash tonight. We already have it. I used that power of attorney on Tuesday morning to take out a $75,000 line of credit against your condo. The funds hit the corporate account this afternoon. He tapped his chest. You are the guarantor, Margot. Whether you like it or not, you are in this business. If Caden sinks, your house goes with him. The silence in the loft was no longer expectant. It was suffocating. I didn't look at my mother, who had pressed her hand over her mouth, or at Caden, who was suddenly staring at our father with a mixture of awe and absolute terror. I kept my eyes locked on the heavy stock paper in my father's hand. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, but the panic only lasted for about 3 seconds. Then, the cold, methodical part of my brain, the part that managed multi-million-dollar budgets and navigated corporate legal compliance every single day, took over. A limited power of attorney, I said, my voice eerily level, drafted specifically for a residential real estate closing in 2017, does not grant you fiduciary authority to open a commercial line of credit in my name 9 years later. My father sneered, waving the paper. It was broadly written, Margot. It grants me the right to act on your financial behalf. It grants you the right to sign closing documents for one specific address. I corrected him. I didn't step toward him. I turned my head and looked directly at Jasper, the man in the tailored suit who had just asked the most important question of the night. Jasper, was it? I asked. Jasper nodded slowly. His eyes were entirely unreadable, calculating the exact amount of liability in the room. My father just admitted, in front of 50 witnesses, that he used an expired, limited legal document to fraudulently encumber my primary residence in order to fund this LLC, I said, projecting my voice so every person in the back row could hear. He bypassed bank security protocols to open a line of credit without my knowledge or consent. In the state of Washington, that is bank fraud. It is a felony, and any funds sitting in Caden's corporate account right now are the proceeds of a financial crime. Caden lunged forward, gripping the microphone stand. Margot, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I snapped, finally looking at my brother. If you touch a single cent of that $75,000, you are an accessory to fraud. If you use it to pay your developers, they are receiving stolen funds. Your entire company is legally contaminated as of Tuesday morning. Jasper didn't say a word to me. He turned to Caden. Is the seed money in your account derived from this line of credit? Caden swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing frantically. Jasper, it's a family misunderstanding. We can clear the title. The IP is what you're investing in, the blockchain logistics. I am not investing in a federal indictment, Jasper said flatly. He buttoned his suit jacket. I told you I needed clean cap tables and zero liability. You brought me a stolen house. Jasper looked at the other 2 men in suits standing near the bar. He didn't even have to nod. They all set their drinks down in unison. Jasper, please, my mother suddenly shrieked, stepping forward, her hands outstretched. Arthur is just protective. We are a good family. Margot is just having a tantrum. We will sort this out. Jasper walked right past her. Do not contact my firm again, Caden. The 3 investors walked out the heavy iron door of the loft. The loud clack of the latch echoing behind them felt like a gunshot. The room erupted. People started murmuring, grabbing their coats, awkwardly setting down half-eaten appetizers. Nobody wanted to be in the splash zone of whatever this was. Aunt Vera stood perfectly still in the center of the room, her chin raised, watching my father's empire crumble in real time. Spencer was still holding his phone up, recording the exodus. Caden turned slowly to our father. The color had completely drained from his face. What did you do? I secured your runway. My father barked, though his voice wavered. He looked around at the fleeing guests, realizing he had miscalculated completely. He had thought the public pressure of the party would force me to accept the debt quietly to save face. He hadn't anticipated that exposing the debt would send the real money running for the hills. She's bluffing. The bank approved it. It's perfectly legal. It's fraud, Dad. Caden screamed, his voice cracking hysterically. You told me you had an angel investor. You told me it was clean. You just blew up my entire round. I got you the money. My father roared back. I didn't stay for the rest of the shouting match. I walked over to the coat rack, pulled my trench coat off a hanger and slipped it on. My mother grabbed my arm as I walked toward the door. Her nails dug into my sleeve. How could you do this? She hissed, her eyes wild, her makeup beginning to smear. You humiliated us. You ruined your brother's life over money you don't even need. I looked down at her hand, then up at her face. No, Mom. Dad ruined Caden's life, and you let him. Just like you let him ruin Aunt Vera. I pulled my arm out of her grip. Do not call me. I walked out of the loft, down the 3 flights of stairs, and out into the cold night air. My legs were shaking so badly I had to lean against the brick wall of the building for a full minute before I could unlock my car. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen island with my laptop open, waiting for the clock to hit 8:00 a.m. on Monday morning. I spent the weekend pulling every piece of documentation I had. I dug through old emails, found the PDF of the original power of attorney from 2017, and downloaded my current condo deed. I checked my credit report. There it was. A hard inquiry from a mid-sized regional bank, followed by a newly opened home equity line of credit. Balance, $75,000. They had moved fast. My father knew exactly what he was doing. On Monday morning, I walked into the downtown branch of that regional bank. I didn't go to the teller line. I asked the security guard to speak with the branch manager immediately regarding identity theft. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a glass-walled office across from a man named Arlo Beckett. He looked to be in his late 40s, wearing a conservative blue tie, with a demeanor that suggested he had seen every type of financial stupidity imaginable. Miss, Miss Hensley, Arlo said, glancing at the driver's license I had slid across his desk. How can I help you? On Tuesday of last week, a $75,000 HELOC was opened against my property, I said, my voice tight. I did not authorize this account. I did not sign the paperwork. I am here to report it as fraudulent and to initiate the process of having the lien removed from my title. Arlo frowned, clicking his mouse. His eyes scanned his monitor. Let me pull up the file. Give me 1 moment. The office was quiet, save for the clicking of the mouse and the low hum of the air conditioning. I watched his face. I saw the exact moment he found the account. His eyebrows twitched. I see the account, Arlo said slowly. It was opened digitally, but the closing documents were notarized and submitted in person at our Northgate branch. The signature on file matches your name, but it was executed by an Arthur Hensley, utilizing a power of attorney. That power of attorney was for a single real estate transaction in 2017, I said, sliding my copy of the document across the desk. It was explicitly limited to the closing of my condo. It does not grant general financial authority, and it certainly does not grant the authority to leverage my equity for a third-party commercial account. Arlo picked up the paper. He read it once. Then he read it again. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I need to call our legal department. Please do, I said. I sat in that office for 2 hours. Arlo made 3 phone calls. He brought in a regional risk manager. They printed out the application my father had submitted. My father had used his own email address, my social security number, and had somehow convinced a notary at the Northgate branch that the 9-year-old POA was a general enduring document. Miss Hensley, the risk manager finally said, sitting down heavily in the chair next to Arlo, we are freezing the line of credit immediately. The funds that were transferred out to the LLC on Thursday have been flagged for clawback. Because it was a wire transfer to a corporate account at a different institution, it may take a few days to reverse. I don't care how long it takes to reverse the wire, I said. I want the lien off my house. The risk manager nodded. We will begin that process. However, you need to understand the implications of what you are doing today. I understand perfectly. If you sign this affidavit of fraud, Arlo said, sliding a fresh sheet of paper toward me, you are stating under penalty of perjury that Arthur Hensley acted outside his legal authority. The bank will cover the loss on the lien, but we do not write off $75,000. Our fraud department will forward this file to the district attorney. We will pursue criminal charges against your father to recoup our losses. Arlo looked at me, his expression softening just a fraction. I just want to be clear. This isn't a family dispute anymore once you sign this. This is the bank pressing felony fraud charges against your father. I picked up the pen. I thought about the dinner at the Italian restaurant. I thought about the private investigator showing up at my door. I thought about Caden's smug face, telling me I didn't need my own money. I thought about Aunt Vera, eating canned soup for 7 years because she chose family over protecting herself. My father hadn't cared if I lost my home. He only cared about his ego. I signed the paper and pushed it back across the desk. Do what you have to do, I said. I left the bank at noon. By 3 p.m., my phone started ringing. It wasn't my parents. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. I answered it. Margot. Caden's voice came through the speaker. He sounded completely different. The polished, arrogant tech bro was gone. He sounded hollowed out. Frantic. How did you get this number? I asked. I had blocked his actual cell on Friday night. I'm using a burner app. Please, just don't hang up, Caden begged. Margot, the bank just locked the corporate accounts. All of them. Even my personal checking at the same credit union. That's what happens when you receive stolen funds, I said coldly. Margot, they called Dad, the fraud department. They told him you signed an affidavit. Caden's breath was hitching. They told him he has 48 hours to surrender the dispersed funds, or they are issuing a warrant for his arrest. I stayed silent. I pulled my car into my assigned parking spot at my condo building and turned off the engine. You have to call the bank and tell them it was a misunderstanding, Caden pleaded. Tell them you gave him verbal permission and just forgot. Tell them anything. Margot, he's 62 years old. If he gets a felony conviction, he loses his commercial licenses. He loses everything. He lost everything the moment he forged my name. Caden, I'll pay you back, Caden shouted, desperate now. I'll find another investor. I'll get the 75 grand and I'll pay off the HELOC. Just give me a month. Give me 2 months. Just call the bank off. No, Margot, he's our dad. And you're my brother, I replied, the anger finally bleeding through my forced calm. And you stood at a podium and watched him try to steal my house. You didn't care about my financial ruin, Caden. You only care now because the money got frozen. He's going to go to jail, Margot. Then he shouldn't have committed bank fraud, I said, and hung up. I blocked the burner number. I walked upstairs to my condo, locked the deadbolt, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't adrenaline. It was the crushing, heavy reality of what I had just done. I had just initiated the destruction of my own family. But as I looked around my quiet, safe living room, I realized something. They had destroyed it long before I ever signed that paper. The next morning, the complications multiplied. I was at my desk at the office trying to review a quarterly budget report when my desk phone rang. It was the receptionist from the main lobby downstairs. Margot? She asked. Her voice hushed. There's a woman here to see you. She says she's your mother. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. I don't have an appointment. I told her that. She said she's not leaving until you come down. She's causing a bit of a scene, Margot. She's crying in the waiting area. People are staring. I closed my eyes. My mother knew exactly how to weaponize public perception. She knew I had a reputation to maintain at my company. She was bringing the mess to my doorstep. I'll be right down, I said. I took the elevator down to the ground floor. The lobby of my building was expansive, all glass and polished marble. Sitting on one of the white leather sofas was my mother. She looked completely disheveled. She was wearing a trench coat over sweatpants, her hair unbrushed, clutching a tissue. When she saw me, she stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten me like she had at the loft. She completely crumbled. Margot, she sobbed, walking toward me, her arms wrapping around her own torso. Margot, please, Mom, keep your voice down, I muttered, grabbing her elbow and steering her toward a quiet corner near near the security desk. You cannot be here. They took the car, she choked out, tears spilling down her cheeks. I stopped. What? The bank, she said, gasping for air. Your father, when he took out the line of credit, he didn't just wire the money to Caden. He took a cash advance. He used it to pay off the arrears on the house and the car. We were behind, Margot. He's been hiding it from me for months. I stared at her, trying to process this new information. The narrative my father had spun, the generous patriarch risking it all to fund his son's brilliant startup, was a complete lie. He hadn't just stolen my equity to help Caden. He had stolen it to bail himself out of a financial collapse he had kept hidden from everyone. The bank froze all of Arthur's accounts this morning, my mother cried, wiping her face with the tissue. The auto loan was through the same credit union. They invoked the cross-collateralization clause. They came and towed the car at 6 a.m. Margot, we have nothing. He used your money to stop the foreclosure on our house. She grabbed my hands. Her grip was tight, desperate. If you don't drop the charges, we lose the house. We have nowhere to go. Please, I am begging you. I know he was wrong, but don't put your mother on the street. I stared down at her, listening to the echo of her sobs bouncing off the cold marble walls of the lobby. A few of my colleagues from the marketing department walked out of the elevator bank, their eyes darting toward us before quickly looking away. The security guard was hovering a few feet away, shifting his weight, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel the familiar, heavy guilt that usually accompanied my mother's tears. I just felt profoundly tired. Get up, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Margot, get up, Mom. You are not going to do this here. I grabbed her elbow, pulling her up from the white leather sofa with more force than I intended. She stumbled slightly, clutching her oversized purse. Walk outside. Now, I marched her through the revolving glass doors and out onto the sidewalk. The Seattle drizzle was just starting to pick up, spotting the shoulders of my blazer. I didn't stop until we were half a block away, ducking under the green awning of a closed deli. The street noise was loud enough to drown out our conversation. Show me, I demanded, crossing my arms over my chest. She sniffled, wiping her mascara-smudged eyes. Show you what? The foreclosure notices. The arrears on the car. Show me the proof that he used my $75,000 to save your house. She recoiled, offended. You think I'm lying to you? After everything that just happened? I think you and Dad spent the last month lying to my face. So yes, I want to see the paperwork. Open your phone, Mom. Show me the bank portal. Show me the emails from the mortgage lender. She hesitated. Her hands were shaking as she unclasped her purse and pulled out her phone. She fumbled with the passcode, her thumb slipping on the screen. She opened her email app and searched a few keywords, eventually turning the screen toward me. I took the phone. There were dozens of emails from their mortgage servicer. Notice of default. Intent to foreclose. Final warning. I checked the dates. They went back 8 months. 8 months of ignored warnings, escalating fees, and legal threats. I scrolled further down, looking at the attached ledger. The past due balance on their mortgage was $42,000. The auto loan arrears were another $9,000. He paid it on Thursday, my mother whispered, leaning against the brick wall of the deli. He went to the bank right after the funds cleared from the line of credit. He wired $50,000 to the mortgage company and paid off the car in cash. He told me he got a bridge loan from a private lender to tide us over until Caden's company took off. I handed her the phone back. The cold rain was blowing sideways under the awning, but I barely felt it. If he used $50,000 to save the house and $9,000 on the car, what happened to the rest of the money? My mother looked down at the wet pavement. She didn't answer. Mom, where is the other $16,000? He gave it to Caden, she said quietly, for the launch party, the loft rental, the catering, the PR firm. He told Caden it was the first installment of your seed money. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my throat. The audacity of it was staggering. So Caden really didn't know the money was stolen? No, she insisted, looking up at me with wide, pleading eyes. Caden didn't know. He thought you were just being difficult at the dinner party, but that Dad had talked you into it privately. Your father told him you signed the paperwork on Tuesday. Caden is a victim in this too, Margot. I shook my head, stepping back from her. No, he's not. Caden is a grown man who happily participated in a campaign of harassment to bully me into funding his delusion. He just happened to get conned by the same man he was using to con me. Margot, you have to call the bank, she begged, grabbing my sleeve again. If the bank reverses the wire transfers, the mortgage company will reinstate the default. We will lose the house by the end of the month. Arthur will go to prison. He's 62. He has high blood pressure. He won't survive it. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her graying hair, the deep lines around her mouth, the desperate, frantic energy of a woman who had spent 40 years covering for a man who destroyed everything he touched. Do you understand what you're asking me to do? I asked, my voice steady and flat. If I call the bank and retract my fraud affidavit, the $75,000 lien stays on my condo. I become legally responsible for that debt. I will have to pay back the money Dad stole from me, plus interest, for the next 15 years. She swallowed hard. Her eyes darted away from mine, looking at the passing traffic. You make good money, Margot. You're a director now. You get bonuses. You can afford the monthly payments. We can't. The silence between us stretched out, heavy and suffocating. I had always known my parents favored Caden. I had always known they viewed my stability as a resource to be tapped rather than an accomplishment to be celebrated. But hearing her say it out loud, hearing my own mother explicitly demand that I sacrifice my home, my credit, and my future to subsidize their fraud, broke whatever remaining tether I had to her. You want me to pay $75,000 for a house I don't live in, and a tech startup that doesn't exist, I stated. We are family, she said, her voice trembling, grasping at the only weapon she had left. You don't send your family to jail. Aunt Vera didn't send him to jail, I replied coldly. She paid his debts. She ate canned soup and ruined her credit, and Dad didn't speak to her for a decade. He didn't thank her. He didn't pay her back. He just moved on to the next grift. I am your mother, she suddenly screamed, slapping her hand against the brick wall. A pedestrian walking a golden retriever stopped and stared before hurrying away. I raised you. We gave you everything. You owe us this. I owe you nothing. I stepped out from under the awning, into the rain. I'm not dropping the charges. I'm not calling the bank. You need to go home, Mom. Pack your things. Call a bankruptcy lawyer. Because I am done. I turned my back on her and walked toward my office building. I didn't look back, even when I heard her sobbing my name. When I got back to my desk, I was soaked, shivering, and completely drained. I sat in my ergonomic chair and stared blankly at my dual monitors for 20 minutes, entirely unable to focus on the spreadsheets glowing back at me. My desk phone rang. It was an external number. I picked it up. Margot Hensley. Miss Hensley, this is Arlo Beckett from the bank. Do you have a moment? Yes, Arlo, go ahead. I wanted to give you an update on the clawback process, he said, his tone strictly professional. Our fraud department moved quickly this morning. We successfully froze the remaining funds in the corporate LLC account, roughly $14,000. We are initiating the reversal on that amount now. And the rest of it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Arlo sighed. The rest of the funds were dispersed by Arthur Hensley prior to the freeze. Specifically, $50,000 was wired to a third-party mortgage servicer, and $9,000 was paid in cash to clear an auto lien. I know, I said. I just found out. There was a brief pause on the line. Miss Hensley, because those funds were used to settle legitimate pre-existing debts with other financial institutions. Recovering them is going to be significantly more complicated. The mortgage company accepted the wire in good faith to cure a default. They will fight the clawback. So what does that mean for me? I asked, rubbing my temples. It means the bank is taking a loss, Arlo said, which means the bank's legal counsel is escalating this immediately. We are forwarding the complete file to the King County Prosecutor's Office this afternoon. But there is a secondary issue that has come to light during our internal audit. My stomach tightened. What secondary issue? The notarization of the power of attorney, Arlo explained. As you pointed out, the original document was 9 years old and limited in scope. For Arthur to use it to open a HELOC, he had to sign an updated attestation claiming the POA was still active and unrestricted. That attestation was notarized at our Northgate branch on Tuesday. Right, you mentioned that. How did he convince a notary to stamp that? He didn't convince them, Arlo said quietly. We pulled the branch security footage from Tuesday morning. Arthur didn't walk up to a random teller. He went directly to the desk of a specific loan officer who carries a notary seal. A woman named Imogen Trask. I froze. The name hit me like a physical blow. Imogen Trask. She wasn't just a loan officer. She was the mother of Caden's college roommate. She had been at the anniversary dinner. She was one of the 12 people sitting at that mahogany table, drinking vintage Barolo, watching my father demand I empty my savings. Miss Hensley, are you still there? I know her, I said, my voice completely hollow. She was at the dinner where they tried to pressure me into giving them the money. Arlo let out a sharp, heavy breath. That changes things considerably. If the notary was a known associate of your father, and she intentionally certified a fraudulent legal document knowing it was going to be used to encumber your property, this is no longer a simple case of identity theft. What is it then? It's conspiracy to commit bank fraud, Arlo said grimly. Imogen Trask has been suspended pending a full investigation. Our corporate security team is interviewing her right now. If she admits that she knew Arthur lacked the authority to sign those documents, she's facing federal charges alongside him. I hung up the phone a few minutes later, the reality of the situation pressing down on me with a suffocating weight. My father hadn't just acted in a moment of desperate panic. He had recruited an accomplice. He had systematically planned to steal my equity, utilizing a network of people who smiled at me over plates of pasta while knowing exactly what they were going to do to me. My cell phone buzzed on the desk. It was Spencer, my cousin. I picked it up. Spencer, I really can't deal with any family drama right now. Margot, you need to listen to me, Spencer said, his voice tight with urgency. He wasn't at work. I could hear the sound of a car engine running in the background. I'm sitting outside the Northgate branch right now. Why are you at the bank? Because Aunt Vera called me, he said. She told me to keep an eye on Arthur. I drove past his house an hour ago. His truck was gone, so I checked the credit union. Not there. Then I came here. Spencer, what is going on? Arthur is here, Margot. He's standing in the parking lot, screaming at a woman in a gray suit. I think she works here. She looks terrified. Imogen. Spencer, don't get out of the car. Just leave him alone. He's losing his mind, Margot. He's grabbing her arm. Spencer's voice spiked with genuine alarm. Wait, she just shoved him away. She's getting into her car. He's pounding on her window. Call the police, Spencer. Do not intervene. He's walking back to his truck, Spencer reported, his breathing heavy over the phone. He looks, Margot. He looks completely unhinged. He's getting in. He's peeling out of the lot. Let him go. Margot, Spencer said softly. He just pulled out onto the main road. He's heading south on I-5, south, toward downtown, toward my office. Are you sure? I asked, my pulse suddenly thrumming in my ears. He's driving like a maniac. Margot, if he knows you signed that affidavit, and he knows Imogen just rolled on him to corporate security, he has nothing left to lose. Where are you? I'm at work. Stay in the building, Spencer ordered. Tell your security desk not to let him up. I disconnected the call. I stood up from my desk and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the downtown streets. The rain was coming down harder now, blurring the brake lights of the traffic below. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, hard knot of anger settling deep in my chest. For 30 years, I had played by their rules. I had kept my head down, paid my own way, built a life that was quiet and secure, while they lived in a chaotic cycle of grandiosity and collapse. They had always treated me like collateral damage. I walked out of my office and down the carpeted hallway toward the elevators. I didn't go down to the lobby. I went up to the 20th floor, to the legal department of my own company. I knocked on the glass door of Thad Wolf, the senior corporate counsel. Thad was a sharp, pragmatic man in his 50s who had helped me navigate a complex vendor dispute last quarter. He looked up from his reading glasses as I walked in. Margot, what can I do for you? I need a personal referral, Thad, I said, closing the door behind me. I need the most aggressive civil litigator you know, someone who specializes in asset recovery and fraudulent conveyances. Thad took off his glasses. He studied my face for a long moment, seeing the absolute lack of compromise in my posture. Who are we going after? My father, I said, and his business partners. Before Thad could answer, the fire alarm in in the building began to shriek, a deafening, rhythmic blare that rattled the glass walls of the office. The strobe lights on the ceiling flashed blinding white. Thad frowned, standing up and grabbing his suit jacket. We didn't have a drill scheduled for today. I looked out the window. Down on the street level, directly in front of the main entrance to our building, a familiar beat-up Ford F-150 was parked at a violent angle across 2 lanes of traffic, its hazard lights flashing. My father had arrived, and he wasn't trying to hide anymore. Thad stepped up to the glass, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. He looked down at the truck blocking the crosswalk, the flashing hazards reflecting off the wet pavement, and then back up at the strobe lights pulsing on our ceiling. "Is that him?" Thad asked, his voice entirely calm, the seasoned composure of a man who had spent 30 years untangling other people's disasters. "Yes. I assume he didn't check in at the front desk." "No," I said, my voice barely audible over the blare of the alarm. "Security wouldn't have let him pass the turnstiles. Not after my mother was here this morning. So he pulled the fire pull station in the lobby to flush you out," Thad concluded, already turning away from the window. He grabbed his briefcase. "Amateur hour. Come on. We have to walk down 20 flights." I followed him into the corridor, joining the sudden stream of marketing executives, accountants, and HR directors pouring out of their offices. We funneled into the concrete stairwell. The noise in there was deafening, the alarm echoing off the cinderblock walls, mixed with the scuffing of hundreds of leather shoes and the nervous, irritated chatter of my colleagues. It smelled like damp wool and stale coffee. Nobody knew it was a false alarm yet. Nobody knew a 62-year-old man having a financial meltdown had triggered it. They just complained about the rain and the interruption to their Friday afternoon. I kept my eyes fixed on the gray concrete steps, one foot in front of the other, feeling a hot, prickling wave of humiliation crawling up my neck. My father was turning my life into a public spectacle. He was infecting the one place where I had total control, the one place where my competence was unquestioned. When we finally pushed through the heavy fire doors onto the ground floor, the lobby was chaotic. 2 security guards were standing near the shattered glass of the manual fire alarm box near the main entrance, talking rapidly into their radios. Through the revolving doors, I could see the plaza filling up with my coworkers, huddling under umbrellas in the cold drizzle. And right in the middle of them, standing on the hood of his truck, was my father. He looked insane. He was soaking wet, his gray hair plastered to his forehead, wearing the same flannel jacket he had worn to the launch party. He was holding a crumpled piece of paper, probably the bank notice freezing his accounts, and he was scanning the crowd, his eyes wild and desperate. Thad put a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to go out there. We can wait by the elevators until the fire department clears the building." "No," I said. "If I hide, he'll just keep coming back. He thrives on audiences. Let's give him one." I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the rain. The cold air hit my face, shocking my system. I didn't pull my hood up. I walked straight toward the plaza, cutting through a group of junior analysts who were huddled under the awning. My father saw me. "Margot," he bellowed. His voice cracked, carrying over the ambient noise of the crowd and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Every head in the plaza turned. 300 of my colleagues, my managers, the people I ate lunch with, the people I negotiated contracts with. They all stopped talking and stared. My father scrambled down from the hood of the truck, his boots hitting the wet pavement with a heavy thud. He marched toward me, shoving past a bewildered administrative assistant. "You called the bank," he screamed, waving the wet piece of paper in my face. "You signed the affidavit. They locked the accounts, Margot. They took the money back." I stood my ground, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my trench coat. "I told you I wasn't going to pay for your fraud, Dad." "It wasn't fraud," he roared, stepping so close I could smell the stale coffee and panic on his breath. "It was family business. I kept a roof over your mother's head. And you, my own flesh and blood, you sign a piece of paper to send me to prison? Over 75 grand? You make that in a fiscal quarter." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd of onlookers. People were shifting uncomfortably, pulling their coats tighter, eyes darting between me and the unhinged man screaming in my face. "I don't care if I make it in a week," I said, my voice cold, sharp, and perfectly modulated so it didn't echo his hysteria. "You stole my identity. You used an expired document. You recruited Imogen Trask to illegally stamp it, and you stole my equity to bail yourself out of your own failures. You didn't do it for Caden. You didn't do it for Mom. You did it because you're a coward who couldn't admit you were broke." His face contorted, flushing a deep, dangerous purple. He raised his hand, pointing a thick, shaking finger squarely at my chest. "I built you. I fed you. You owe me. I owe you nothing. You're a selfish, ungrateful bitch." He spat. "You're going to ruin this family because you're too cheap to help your own brother, Arthur." A calm, authoritative voice interrupted. Thad Wolf stepped out from the crowd. He didn't look angry. He looked profoundly bored. He stood next to me, sliding his hands into his suit pockets. My father blinked, thrown off by the sudden appearance of a stranger. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm corporate counsel for this firm," Thad said smoothly. "And you are currently trespassing on private commercial property. You have also unlawfully triggered a fire alarm, which is a misdemeanor in this city, and you are publicly harassing one of our directors." Sirens wailed, suddenly much closer. A red fire engine turned the corner, its massive horn blasting to clear the intersection. Right behind it, 2 Seattle Police Department cruisers pulled up, their light bars cutting through the gray afternoon rain. My father looked at the police cars, then back at me, the bravado suddenly draining from his face. The reality of the flashing lights seemed to break whatever manic spell he had been under since the bank called him. "Margot," he pleaded, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Tell them it's a family dispute. Tell them I was just leaving." "You did this to yourself," I said, stepping back. 2 police officers got out of the lead cruiser. They didn't draw weapons, they just walked briskly toward the plaza, zeroing in on the truck parked illegally across the crosswalk, and the man standing in front of it. A security guard jogged out to meet them, pointing directly at my father. "Sir, step away from the vehicle," the taller officer commanded, resting his hand on his utility belt. My father didn't argue. He didn't fight. The fight had entirely left him. He raised his hands, looking small, old, and pathetic in his soaking wet flannel jacket. They patted him down, asked for his ID, ID, and when the security guard confirmed he was the one who shattered the pull station glass, they clicked a pair of handcuffs around his wrists. They didn't arrest him for bank fraud. Not yet. That warrant hadn't been issued. They arrested him for the disturbance, for the false alarm, for being a public nuisance. I watched them put him in the back of the cruiser. I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I just felt empty. The crowd of coworkers slowly began to disperse as the fire department gave the all clear. People avoided making eye contact with me as they filed back into the building. The social damage was done. By Monday, the entire floor would be gossiping about Margot Hensley's criminal father. Thad turned to me. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, matte black business card. He handed it to me. Hester Quill, Thad said quietly. She's a civil litigator. She used to be a prosecutor for the state before she went into private practice. She handles asset recovery and complex fraud. I looked down at the silver embossed lettering on the card. If the bank presses criminal charges, the state will handle the prison time. Thad explained, his tone strictly professional. But the criminal courts move slowly, and restitution is rarely guaranteed. If you want the lien off your condo before it craters your credit, and if you want to ensure your father and this Imogen woman can never touch your assets again, you need to file a civil suit simultaneously. Hester will freeze everything they own before they can hide it. Thank you, Thad. Call her on Monday morning. Tell her I sent you. And Margot? I looked up. Take the rest of the day off. Go home. I didn't argue. I went back up to the 20th floor, just long enough to grab my laptop bag and my keys, and then I took the elevator straight down to the parking garage. The drive home was a blur of gray traffic and the hypnotic swish of my windshield wipers. When I finally unlocked the door to my condo, the silence of the empty space was heavy. I dropped my keys on the console table, shrugged off my wet trench coat, and walked into the kitchen. I sat at the island, staring at the matte black business card. Hester Quill. My phone vibrated on the marble countertop. It was Caden. Again, I almost didn't answer it. I almost hit the red button and threw the phone across the room, but a cold, clinical curiosity took over. I wanted to know what his angle was now that Dad was sitting in a holding cell. I swiped green. What, Caden? Is it true? He asked. He didn't sound angry. He sounded completely broken. Is what true? Mom just called me. She said Dad got arrested at your office. He pulled a fire alarm and caused a scene. Yes, he was arrested for a public disturbance. Caden let out a long, shaky breath. Margot, Jasper's lawyers just sent me a cease and desist. I paused. The investor from the party? Yeah, Caden said, his voice cracking. Jasper is well connected in the tech scene here. He didn't just walk out of the loft on Friday. He called his network. He told them I tried to pass off stolen family equity as clean seed money. He told them my cap table was a legal landmine. I've had 3 other potential backers pull out since this morning. No one will take my calls. I told you the money was contaminated, I said flatly. My company is dead, Margot. It's completely dead. The developers locked me out of the source code because the bank reversed the initial deposit. The PR firm canceled my retainer. I have nothing. And whose fault is that, Caden? Dad's, he whispered. It's Dad's fault. But you didn't have to blow it up in front of Jasper. You could have pulled me aside. You could have told me privately. If I had pulled you aside, you would have tried to talk me into keeping the money in the account to save your launch, I said, hitting the exact nerve I knew was there. Don't pretend you would have done the honorable thing. You only care now because you got caught. I'm your brother, he pleaded, the same tired refrain they all used when they had run out of logic. Not anymore, I said, and hung up. I spent the weekend in a state of suspended animation. I didn't leave the condo. I ordered groceries delivered. I deep cleaned my kitchen, scrubbed the grout in the bathroom, organized my hall closet. I did anything that required physical exertion and zero emotional processing. By Monday morning, the local news blogs had picked up a small blip about the fire alarm incident at my corporate building. They didn't name me, just mentioned an unruly individual causing a public disturbance. It was a minor footnote in the city's daily chaos, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, I called the number on Thad's card. The woman who answered didn't have a receptionist. Hester Quill. Miss Quill, my name is Margot Hensley. Thad Wolf recommended I call you. There was the sound of a heavy file closing on the other end of the line. Thad doesn't hand out my number unless the house is already on fire. What's the damage, Miss Hensley? I gave her the abbreviated version. The fake affidavit, the expired power of attorney, the $75,000 HELOC, the complicit notary, the frozen corporate accounts, the auto loan payoff, and the mortgage arrears. I laid it out exactly as I would a failed corporate acquisition. Pure data. No emotion. Hester listened without interrupting once. When I finally finished, the line was silent for a full 10 seconds. Are you currently sitting in the property that carries the fraudulent lien? She finally asked. Yes, it's my primary residence. And the bank has already initiated a clawback of the remaining funds? 14,000 of it, yes. The rest was dispersed to third-party creditors. Good, Hester said, her voice brisk, calculating. The criminal side will take months, and frankly, the King County DA is overworked. They'll likely offer your father a plea deal for probation and restitution that he will never actually pay. We are not waiting for that. Thad said you could freeze their assets. I can do more than that, Hester said. If your father used the proceeds of a fraudulent loan to cure a default on his own mortgage, he committed a fraudulent conveyance. He used your stolen equity to secure his own asset. I'm going to file a civil suit this afternoon. I will file an emergency lis pendens against his house. What does that mean? It means I slap a legal notice on his property title, Hester explained, the edge in her voice sharpening into something predatory. He won't be able to sell it. He won't be able to borrow against it. And when we win the civil suit, the court will force the liquidation of that house to pay off your HELOC. I gripped the edge of my kitchen island. You're going to take their house. No, Margot. They already lost their house. They just stole yours to pretend they didn't. I am simply correcting the math. Hester paused. I need to know you have the stomach for this. Civil litigation against family is ugly. They will beg, they will threaten, they will send flying monkeys to guilt you. If I file this, I don't stop until you are whole. Are you in? I'm in, I said. My voice didn't shake. The words felt like a heavy iron door clicking shut, locking out 30 years of obligation and manufactured guilt. Good, Hester replied. Check your email for the retainer agreement. agreement. Once you sign it, turn off your phone. Let me do my job. I signed the digital document, wired her the retainer fee from my checking account, and powered down my cell phone. For the first time in a week, my condo was entirely silent. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I made a cup of chamomile tea, sat on my sofa, and watched the Seattle rain streak across the living room windows. Hester Quill went to war. By 4 p.m. that Monday, the emergency lease pendens was filed with the county clerk. By Tuesday morning, a process server was knocking on my parents' front door to deliver a civil lawsuit naming Arthur Hensley and Imogen Trask as co-defendants in a coordinated scheme of fraudulent conveyance and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. When I finally turned my phone back on Wednesday evening, the fallout was exactly what Hester had predicted. My voicemail was full. There were frantic, sobbing messages from my mother, demanding I withdraw the suit. There were angry, blustering voicemails from my uncle, the one who had told me to support my family at the party, calling me a traitor and a sociopath. There was even a long text from Caden, oscillating between begging me for a loan to hire a defense attorney for Dad and blaming me for ruining Mom's life. I didn't reply to a single one. I forwarded the voicemails and screenshots to Hester's paralegal, blocked the numbers, and went to bed. The legal process didn't happen overnight. It dragged out over 6 grueling months, but Hester was a machine. She systematically dismantled every defense my father's bargain bin attorney tried to mount. They tried to argue I had given verbal consent. Hester subpoenaed the bank security footage showing Imogen Trask stamping the 9-year-old document while my father looked over his shoulder. They tried to claim the money was a gift. Hester produced the trail of wire transfers proving my father used it to instantly cure his own mortgage default. Imogen was the first to fold. Confronted with the prospect of federal prison time and the permanent loss of her notary license and banking career, she took a plea deal from the King County DA. She admitted she knew the power of attorney was invalid and that Arthur had promised her a cut of Caden's startup profits in exchange for pushing the HELOC through the system. Once Imogen flipped, the criminal case against my father was airtight. Facing 2 felony counts, he took a plea agreement, 5 years of probation, mandatory restitution, and a permanent revocation of his commercial distribution licenses. He wouldn't see the inside of a cell, but his reputation in the Seattle business community was incinerated. But the criminal courts didn't get my money back. Hester did. Faced with a civil trial he was guaranteed to lose, my father's attorney finally reached out to negotiate a settlement. The terms Hester dictated were absolute and non-negotiable. On a crisp Tuesday morning in late October, I sat in Hester's downtown office. Across the polished mahogany conference table sat my father and mother. My father looked 10 years older. He had lost weight, his face sagging, the arrogant posture he had carried his whole life replaced by a hollow, defeated slump. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on his hands, which were resting on his lap. My mother sat rigidly next to him, clutching her purse. She shot daggers at me across the table, her eyes red-rimmed and bitter. The settlement agreement is straightforward, Hester said, sliding a thick stack of stapled papers across the table toward their attorney. Arthur and your client will immediately list the Mercer Island property for sale. The proceeds of the sale will first be used to satisfy the original mortgage balance. The next $75,000, plus all accrued interest, legal fees, and early repayment penalties, will be wired directly to my client's regional bank to clear the fraudulent HELOC. My mother let out a sharp, trembling breath. You're taking our home. Arthur took your home, Hester corrected her, her voice devoid of any sympathy. He leveraged it against a stolen asset. We are simply untangling the theft. If you don't sign this today, we go to trial next week. You will lose the house anyway, and you'll be on the hook for another $40,000 in litigation costs. Their attorney leaned over and whispered something to my father. My father didn't argue. He didn't yell. He picked up the black pen provided by Hester and signed his name on the dotted line. His hand shook so badly the signature barely looked like his own. My mother signed next, tears splashing onto the legal paper. They stood up to leave. My father finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in 6 months. There was no apology in his expression, just a cold, lingering resentment. He still believed he was the victim. He still believed I was the villain for not letting him drown me. He opened his mouth to speak, but Hester cut him off. You are bound by a no-contact order as part of your criminal probation, Arthur, she reminded him sharply. You speak to her. I call your parole officer before you reach the elevator. He closed his mouth, turned, and walked out of the office. My mother followed him, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind them. You did good, Hester said, gathering the signed documents. The title company will handle the escrow. Your condo will be free and clear before Thanksgiving. Thank you, Hester, I said quietly. The house sold fast. The Seattle real estate market was ruthless, and a desperate seller was blood in the water. By the second week of November, the wire transfer hit my bank. The $75,000 balance on the HELOC dropped to zero. The bank issued a formal release of lien on my condo title. I was whole again. I heard through Spencer that my parents had moved into a small, rented 2-bedroom apartment in a dreary suburb an hour south of the city. Caden had been forced to abandon his tech CEO fantasy and take a mid-level sales job at a logistics company, completely frozen out of the startup scene after the Jasper debacle. On Thanksgiving Day, my condo smelled like roasting garlic and rosemary. I hadn't gone to the large extended family gathering. I had politely declined the invitations from the aunts and uncles who had stood by silently at that anniversary dinner. I was done pretending. Instead, I set the small dining table for 2. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m. I opened it to find Aunt Vera standing on the welcome mat, holding a bottle of vintage Barolo and a bakery box. She was wearing a sharp, tailored wool coat, her eyes bright and clear. I brought the good stuff, Vera said, stepping inside and handing me the wine and a pecan pie. You didn't have to bring anything, Vera. I have way too much food. She hung her coat on the rack and looked around my living room. The fire was going in the gas fireplace. Soft jazz was playing on the speakers. The space was warm, safe, and entirely mine. No liens, no threats, no manufactured chaos. Vera turned to me, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. voice. You did what I didn't have the courage to do 25 years ago, she said softly. You stopped the cycle. I am incredibly proud of you, Margot. I smiled back, feeling the last lingering knot of tension dissolve in my chest. Come on, I told her, carrying the wine toward the kitchen. Let's eat.